The House Oversight Committee digging deeper into the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy. Lawmakers listening to testimony from Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz today, asking him about a recent report accusing top DOJ officials of pushing the family separation policy back in 2018. NBC News correspondent Julia Ainsley joins me now. Julia, what did we learn from the Inspector General today?
Well, in part, Allison, we learned about areas where they didn't go, where they didn't get answers. This report was incredibly comprehensive. It was 2.5 years in the making. We learned far more from it than we did from, say, DHS's or HHS's look at the zero tolerance policy, because we were able to see who was actually behind this, the conversations in the room, and it dispelled those myths that this was some sort of unintentional consequence of what happens when you try to secure the border, that it was intentional to take away the children. Jeff Sessions explicitly said so. But there were a lot of interesting exchanges as members pressed Horowitz for more information, particularly why the Justice Department didn't react once this policy went out the door and they saw the media scrutiny, they saw the public in outrage as these children were ripped away from their parents in May and June of 2018. Here's a particular tense exchange where we got some answers, starting with the questioning of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
When top DOJ officials learned that children were being held by Border Patrol for longer than 72 hours, which was violating federal law, did DOJ stop the zero tolerance policy?
So as all of this was occurring in May and these reports were coming up, there was no change in the zero tolerance policy. It only ended on June 20 with the executive order being issued that ceased it to be allowed to go forward.
So, Allison, I mean, you can see here, you can see clearly that Horowitz says that there was no action taken. There were some conversations that Sessions and then Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein had with these U.S. attorneys as they all said, why are we seeing parents who have been ripped from their children in our courtrooms? But there really wasn't any pullback until, as we know, President Trump then signed that order to stop the separations in late June of 2018. And we're still facing the repercussions of it now, as we've seen this week with the establishment of a task force to try to find these families.
Julie, it really sounds like former Attorney General Jeff Sessions has the answers to a lot of questions on the zero tolerance policy. So what would it take to get him to testify if it sounds like the Inspector General couldn't get an interview with him?
Yeah, that's right. So there are a lot of limitations to what an Inspector General can and cannot do. And Horowitz wanted to make that case that he can't compel anyone who's not an employee and current employee of the Justice Department to testify. And Jeff Sessions said no. I should even say, as a journalist, I don't even know how to find Jeff Sessions. No one knows how to find Jeff Sessions anymore. He just simply doesn't talk ever. And he didn't agree to talk to the Inspector General for this case. And so what it would take would be for Congress. Congress has the ability to compel testimony, or they could try to pass legislation that would give inspector generals, not just at the Justice Department, but other agencies, the power to compel people outside of current employees to testify.
Julia, still asking a bit about Sessions. During the hearing, Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence asked Horowitz if Sessions made any attempt to help resolve the trauma to the children separated from their families once it became clear how this policy was affecting them. What did he say about that?
Yeah, it was interesting. So he said that they really didn't reach out, that it became clear that these children, I mean, Allison, you can remember we've played that audio before. It's heartbreaking when you hear the children crying out in Spanish for their mothers after they've just been taken away. They're toddlers, so some younger than that. And he basically said that they didn't do anything. And so that's why this really does come down to Sessions. Now, they did get testimony from Rod Rosenstein, from the man who filled in as acting Attorney General, Matt Whitaker. They talked to Gene Hamilton, who was essentially Stephen Miller's ally at the Justice Department. And they got into a lot of the conversations, and different U.S. attorneys, I talked to them about what led to this. But it was Jeff Sessions who sat in a White House meeting and said, you have to take away the children. So he holds a lot of answers. Where did this start, and why did he think that this was the way to do it?
So, Julia, the House Oversight Committee has had this hearing. What happens next?
Well, what happens next is we see how we stay on it, Allison. I mean, I think it will be, there are more answers and more things to answer from the report that weren't answered. But I really think now when it comes to zero tolerance, we look forward more. We see how these families are reunited. You and I talk about these numbers all the time. You've been so great at keeping up with this. So I think we'll continue to watch this space. But right now, the case that Horowitz made was that he's delivered this report, and this is kind of where the road ends with him because he's gone as far as he could. One last thing I'll point out is the fact that this is 2.5 years after zero tolerance would have ended, or the family separation policy officially ended. And one of the things that didn't come up that I would ask is, why did this take so long? Because as we've heard, there were people inside the Justice Department who really didn't want this report to come out. So it finally did. But what held it up? That's a question for me that I'd like to answer.
Well, Julia, we'll continue to check in with you until every one of those 611 children are reunited with their parents. And we'll continue to check in with you to see if anyone can track down Jeff Sessions.
Yes, will do. I'll let you know if I find him.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.